Welcome to Extension Connection on Super Talk 1270. Thoughtful information and discussion with experts from both Burleigh and Morton County Extension Service offices. Extension Connection provides advice on family nutrition, issues in agriculture, lawn and garden, community leadership, homeowner concerns, and so much more. Live from the Super Talk 1270 studio, this is Extension Connection.
Good morning. This is Amelia Dahl, 4-H Youth Development Agent from Burleigh County, and I'm joined today by Ashley Stegman, our Ag and Natural Resource Agent. And this is Extension Connection, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about taking care of our animals now that it's extremely cold.
Yes, and I'm sure many of you are hopefully in a warm vehicle or a warm tractor or maybe at home cuddled up on the couch or something.
That's where I wish I was.
I know, right? That would be a nice place.
Right.
But, Jim, your studio here is very nice and warm. We thank you for that. Like Amelia said, we are going to be talking a little bit about some of those tips to take care of your livestock and then your little critters, maybe your dog, your cats, or what other pets you might have.
Hamsters, snakes.
I might not talk
spiders.
So much about those types, but really talking about our cats and our dogs and then, of course, our livestock. And the other thing, if we have time, we're going to talk a little bit about not only our pets, but also maybe our plants, our house plants. Right now, our house plants are basking in the warmth of our home, but there are a few things that we should be doing for our plants just to keep them very vital and healthy throughout the cold time of the year.
I think winters is one of the toughest times to have a green thumb.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because people are like, just get a house plant. It's easy. It's not
that
easy.
No, it's really not. If you are one that maybe you can't find your green thumb during the winter and you want a house plant, definitely look for the ones that don't require a lot of sun. Ones that are very partial sun, because they're not going to require as much TLC as some of the other plants do. And the other thing is, here in North Dakota, we don't get a whole lot of bright sun.
No, I think this weekend it came out once or twice, and I was super excited.
Yeah.
I was like, hey guys, the sun's out, the sun's out.
And then what happened?
And then it went behind a cloud.
And
it was really cold. It's really cold when the sun is out because those clouds aren't there to keep the warmth.
That's right.
Next to the earth.
That's very true. And another thing that we're going to be talking about, because yesterday, Monday. Sorry.
Today's Wednesday.
Monday. Yep. Monday was Martin Luther King Day.
Yep.
And a lot of us had either school off or maybe some lucky ones didn't have to work that day. So we're going to be talking a little bit about volunteer and what to do and what to give back to your community.
And the benefits that it brings to you. A lot of times people think that they volunteer for other people and it helps other people, which it does, but there's also significant impacts on your own mental and physical health.
Okay.
So we'll touch on that as well.
And exactly this time of the year is the most important time to be thinking about, giving back. And sometimes we see during the winter months, you kind of get a little maybe blue.
The summer blues, yep.
Yeah.
Well, or the winter blues.
The winter blues. We're not to summer yet. I don't think we get summer blues very often in the winter
I do when it's hot in the summertime.
Oh. Just crank up your AC. It'll help. But, that is something that's very serious to talk about. Sometimes people have a really hard time during the winter months and need just a little pick me up, if you will. And what better way to feel better about yourself than giving back to your community?
Yeah, actually 76% of people who volunteered in the last 12 months say that volunteering has helped them feel healthier.
Okay.
So we need help in that area, especially, like you said, this time of year. So there are definite benefits to volunteering. But before we get into volunteering, let's talk about, we've talked a lot about it being cold.
Yes.
And if we're cold outside, our animals are also cold outside.
Exactly.
So what can we do to help keep our animals healthy?
All right. First, I'm going to be talking about livestock, and then we're going to get into our pets. First, really for both livestock and pets, your basics, your food, your water, and your shelter are very important. For livestock, nutrition is really the important concern during this cold time of weather. Outdoor animals require more calories in the winter to generate energy to ward off that cold. Most of the time for our livestock, that requires us to do a 10 to 15% heightened daily diet. So give them just a little bit more to really help them through those cold times of the year.
And bulk them up, basically.
Bulk them up, exactly. And, another way to help fend off some of that cold weather for your livestock is really adding some fat into their regular rations. Not too much that can lead to obesity or diarrhea or dehydration. I don't think we have to worry about them packing on too many pounds during this cold time of the year, but it is important to remember not to just push fats to them. They need more roughage. Roughage is our forages, so our hay, our grasses, and most of the time what ranchers will do is they will hold off and feed bales that are higher in nutrients, that have a better digestible nutrient, and really feed those when it's really cold out, because that's
like this past weekend.
Yes, like this past weekend. That bale has more nutrients. It has more of those fatty lipids that will help them, convert weight and stay warm during this cold time of the year. The other thing, we talked about food. Our shelter is very important, whether it is for livestock or pets. Having an area for those animals to get out of the abrasive weather of North Dakota. Suggested windbreaks are great usage, overhead coverings, warm bedding, high quality feeds can help. And then, when you're thinking about putting that warm bedding out there for your livestock, you want to make sure that you're also taking some of that old stuff out. Yes, some of that old stuff will freeze and it will be hard to move, but you want to make sure that you're not putting that bedding in the same spot time and time again. And that's because you don't want that bedding just to get matted down. And really, when it gets matted down like that, it doesn't aid as warmth and protection for livestock like we would want. So we've talked about food. We've talked about our shelter. The last thing is water. Water must be heated or changed several times a day. So when we have these frigid temperatures, of course our waters are going to probably freeze. So we need either some type of heating block on them, or we need enough movement from the livestock to keep that water open.
And this time of year when it's so cold and water doesn't have to be out long in 15 to below weather to freeze over, having that heater is really important, because water, just like it's important for you and I, is also important for our animals.
That's very true. And talking a little bit more about the shelter, bedding like thick layers of straw or shavings is very critical, since it will keep the animals off the cold, wet ground. And so when you just keep on stacking up your, say, straw pile in the same area again and again, it's really just creating a wet, almost soupy mess for them to lay in. So it's not very, it's not ideal.
It's like sleeping on a broken waterbed.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fun at all.
No. It doesn't.
The other thing is, it's very important, and maybe you're not able to change this or do anything, but the open side of any livestock barn or arena or area really should face away from prevailing winds. And so you want to make sure that, you're maybe opening the barn for the cows to come in on the other side versus the straight force line winds. And with that,
we're going to take a quick break.
Okay, we'll be taking a quick break here.
And then we'll be back. right, welcome back to the Extension Connection. You are joined today by Burleigh County Extension. Amelia and Ashley are here, and before the break we were talking about keeping your livestock healthy and as warm as can be when they're living outside during these bitter cold months. And we talked about food, and now Ashley, with the food, if we have a rancher who is looking for some advice on what to feed or how to feed, they can contact you, correct?
Yes, they can. One thing that we really do suggest our ranchers to do, or individuals with livestock, forage is something that's utilized in about all livestock diets, and so we really strongly suggest getting your forages tested and finding out how nutritious your forages are, and really finding out whether or not it's really high in protein, or maybe it's not as high quality, and that will dictate when you should be feeding that forage that you have. Like I said earlier, when it is really cold, like we have been seeing, we want to be pushing just a little bit more protein and fats in their daily diets, to really help ward off some of those cold issues that we deal with on a daily basis.
So
here in North Dakota.
To get our stuff tested, we just call you at the office.
Yep.
And that number is 221-6865, and just ask to talk to Ashley.
Yep.
So we've talked about the big pets, the big animals that are living outside.
The big pets.
So for those, to some people, livestock are pets.
Yes, that's true. That is true.
Now, for those of us who live in town or don't have livestock, but maybe have a cat or a dog, what are some things that are recommended to keep them, short of keeping them inside the whole time? Like my cats are only indoor cats.
Okay. All right. So usually with our pets, our dogs and cats is what I'm primarily going to be talking about, but some of this can be applicable to your other types of pets. When it is really cold, it is important, if you can, bring some of your smaller pets indoors. And that just, you think about some of your smaller toy type dogs, they're just a little frail. They don't, they won't be able to wear off some of those cold factors that we deal with regularly. So if you can, bring them indoors. If you're unable to keep your dog or your cat inside during the cold winter, really, it's strongly suggested that you provide that animal with some type of shelter or a way to get out of the cold elements. A warm, solid shelter against the wind.
So like doghouse, access to a garage. Those are all places that, aren't too expensive and can really help your animal stay warm. Exactly.
And, when you're talking about these dog houses or these shelters that are indoors for your pets, a few things about your shelter that you should remember. The floor of the shelter should be off the ground. So if you have a dog house and you're just it's a plastic dog house and you just put it outdoors, you want to make sure that you're either putting it up on some blocks or you're putting something inside to really keep that pet warm. The floor of your doghouse should be off the ground, and this really is to minimize that heat loss into the ground. The bedding should be thick and dry, and then changed regularly, really to provide warmth for that pet.
So same thing as we talked about with the cattle. You want to keep that bedding changed. You want to keep it warm. You don't want to let it get packed down and mushy and just gross.
Yep, and it's very important to continue to keep that bedding dry. Whether when your bedding gets wet, that's when the animal, whether it's a pet or livestock, can't keep warm. And so it's really important to be regularly changing that bedding. The door of your shelter should be positioned away from the prevailing winds, just like we talked about with livestock. You really want to put that dog shelter, that dog house, in a direction where they're not going to be, having the wind blown in on them all the time.
Well, and if possible, put it in a protected place. So if you have a spot next to a garage that's going to help additionally with the wind, maybe between a fence and a garage where you can put that dog house so it's even more protected from the wind. Because unlike our houses, those dog houses don't have super thick insulation and heat.
Exactly.
And so we need to do what we can to make that a warm place for animals.
Exactly. Some individuals feel that, maybe I need to get a space heater or a heat lamp or something to really aid in that warmth for their pet. I would avoid those just because there is a real risk of burns and fire with those. And so you don't want anything to happen to your pet. And so really be careful with those. If you feel like your pet needs a heat lamp, make sure that you have it securely hung and that your plug-in is out of the way. Another thing that that individuals, pet owners, might feel that are necessary are heated pet mats. Again, you may want to be cautious with these because they are capable of causing burns if not set up properly. So you really want to, if you're going to have a heating mat, you really want to be setting that up properly and continue to check on it. If it does, if that heat mat gets wet, then there's a heightened possibility of causing some serious burn and some serious hurt for your animal.
And let's face it, the chances of the dog mat getting wet when it's outside with snow and a dog are pretty high.
Pretty high. So I would, I would suggest that you probably stay away from your heat mats if you're going to have a shelter outdoors. Now, if you are an individual that has some type of kennel maybe in your garage for your pet, that at least is more of a controlled area, and that can that can help with that heating mat. Keep an eye on your pet's water. Another thing that we talked about with our livestock. Sometimes owners don't realize that a water bowl has frozen and their pet can't get anything to drink. Because sometimes we don't actually touch the bowl. We just kind of look down and, oh yeah, there's some water in there. But there are actually bowls that you can get that are the heated type bowls that you can plug in.
They're like a smaller version of the giant ones they have for cattle.
That's true. Very true. And so those are actually a good thing to have. That way your pet is always going to have fresh water to be drinking. Animals that don't have access to clean or unfrozen water are more likely to drink out of puddles or gutters, which can be polluted, with
and we
oil,
don't want
antifreeze.
Yeah.
So those are things that we do not want happening. So making sure that your pet has water and that it is unfrozen is best.
With all of these things with the animals, it's important that you're teaching your kids this too. A lot of times we, like in our house, for both of our sons' second birthdays, they each got a cat. And it's their responsibility to help take care of the cat. Right now, at ages 4 and 2, that really means food and water. But even though it's cold outside, if you have a pet that's outside that's supposed to be, quote unquote, your kid's pet, just because it's cold doesn't mean your kid can't go out and take care of it. Make sure they're bundled up, and then they realize the responsibility that goes with having a pet.
Very true, very true. And that it's important that we don't forget about our small pets. So often, they're maybe in their shelter and you think, oh, well, they're okay, or they're in their kennel. Yep, they're fine. But it's very important to make sure with that shelter that they have some type of warm bedding, that their kennel or their shelter isn't wet, and then also that they're getting adequate food and that they have water that's available at all times for them.
All right, so there's a few tips for taking care of your pets. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back with some more information for you. right, welcome back to the Extension Connection. Today you're joined by Burleigh County. You have Amelia Dahl, the 4-H Youth Development Agent, and Ashley Stegman, our Egg and Natural Resource Agent. And the last two segments we've been talking about how to care for your livestock and your pets when they're outside, making sure that they have good shelter, good bedding, unfrozen water, plenty of food, and with our livestock, making sure that that food is a little bit higher in the proteins so that they're able to stay warm. What are some other, I know I see you have some stuff about hypothermia and frostbite, and I think a lot of times we don't think about that as being something that can happen to our animals because they have fur, right?
Yes.
But that's not the case. A lot of times when I was growing up, we had barn cats, and we would have barn cats without tips of their ears.
Oh, yes.
Because of
you
frostbite.
see that a lot. First, another thing, talking about our pets, if you do have a lot of, say, farm cats or outdoor cats, and, you don't really offer them shelter, where cats are normally going to go wherever it's warm. So growing up, we'd have cats, and they'd always be sitting on the front porch because they would try to sit right next to the door to try to get as warm as they could. And the other places that people don't really think of is
Under the hood of your car.
Under the hood of your car, exactly. Or, next to the tractor on the block heater. Some of those areas, you don't think that your pets would go because you think that's not a smart place to go at all. But
these are pets we're talking about, not humans.
Exactly. And they're much more minded of the stay safe or stay warm. Than safe. And so beware of cats under the car hood. Cats can curl up against almost anything that stays warm, and including your car engines. And I remember when growing up on the farm, we would have a wood burner outside in the barn, and the cats would try to stay on that all the time. And that wood burner is what, actually it was a corn cob burner. And we would put old corn cobs in there, burn them, and we would keep our tanks unfrozen for the cows that way. And we would get cats that would they'd prance in the snow, and then they'd jump on that box.
And then they would get burned.
And they would hurt. They would often lose the bottom of their paws because it was hot. It was burning. And so, some of those things you got to think of with pets outdoors. Are they in the engine? Are they close to the wheels? Some of those things. They're just trying to stay warm. We can't be upset at them for that. Because,
can't begrudge somebody for wanting to stay warm.
They can't wear coats like we do, and they don't have thermostats that they can hike up whenever they want.
Well, we can put coats on our animals.
That's true. That is true. Our pets, that is a trend that is becoming very popular, is the coats, the socks, maybe even
boots,
the sweaters for your pets. I see, a lot of dogs that are walking around with little booties on now, which that is something different. But just like our cats and our dogs have those, our livestock kind of have the same types of things. A lot of horses do have blankets. Individuals will put blankets on their horses. I know my brother, who lives back on the family farm, he takes care of a bunch of dairy calves. And so dairy calves, mostly Holstein breed, they're very fine-boned, I'll say. They're not very big. They're not
beefy.
They're not beefy, exactly. They're dairy type. And so they don't handle the cold as well as maybe a beef calf does. And so when he gets these young baby calves that are still on bottles, he actually has blankets for them, that he puts blankets on all the calves, because these calves are all in their own little igloo. They look like an igloo. They're a polydome. It's a little calf hut that they're all in, and they get this little blanket on them. And that's something that just helps them keep warm, keep healthy. And so even with that, just like your pets might have their boots and their sweaters or whatnot, you want to make sure if it gets wet, you take it off. You need to wash it, and you need to dry it. You don't want them sitting in something that's wet, especially if they're outdoors.
Just like you don't like to wear a wet coat, and does no good for you to wear a wet sweater, we don't want our pets to do that as well.
Exactly. And so cover livestock with blankets or some other protective material to keep them warm until, until that weather goes away. And I know this isn't practical for everyone, but if you do have, especially if you have livestock that end up getting sick and you have to aid them, you need to, pay a little more TLC to them. You might want to put a little more extra bedding down. You want to maybe bring them feed versus having them have to get up and walk 50, 20, 100 feet to the feed trough. Maybe just want to take care of them a little bit closer. When talking about our pets, there are a few things that our pets deal with that can happen regularly if they're not cared for correctly. And that's frostbite and even hypothermia. Have you ever seen any animals with frostbite?
I've seen them have the products of frostbite.
Okay.
They lost the tips of their ears, but I've never seen them.
Okay. And that's usually a common thing is with frostbite, it's an injury to the body tissue caused by an exposure to extreme cold. And so this extreme cold, what frostbite does, it's pooling the blood to your center to keep you warm. And so that's why you think about animals' ears, their tails, their nose, yeah. You think about some of those extremities. They're areas that don't have a lot of blood flow regularly anyways. And so that's why we often see in our pets and our livestock tips of the ears frostbitten and tails frostbitten because there's just not a lot of blood movement in those areas. Ears, paws, and tails are the areas that get the coldest. That's where ice crystals form, and that tissue can then become damaged, and that's what then we see the frostbitten ears.
And that's frostbite is extreme. We've all been outside where our fingers have gotten numb or started to turn blue. That's bad. Same thing happens with our animals, and if they don't have a warm place to go, they aren't able to get out of that situation.
Yep.
So it's important that we care for them just as we would ourselves.
Yes, that is very true. And the tricky thing about frostbite is that it's not immediately obvious. You don't know that your pet is suffering from frostbite until several days later when you see the affected tissue showing signs of that. So again, going back to your shelter, that bedding that we've been talking about so much during this segment, really keeping your animals warm and not wet. Because if they're wet, that's when you're going to have the biggest issue with frostbite and even hypothermia. Yeah, when you have wet and cold, your risks of hypothermia and frostbite increase 3-4 times. Just be mindful of that when you are taking care of pets and also yourself outside. So we're going to take another quick break, and we'll come back with our last segment in a minute. Welcome back to the Extension Connection. This is Burleigh County. You're joined today by Amelia and Ashley. And before the break, the last 3 segments, we've been talking about taking care of your pets and your livestock in the cold weather. Now, we're supposed to have a warm-up this weekend. And by warm-up, I mean maybe above 32 degrees. Well, I'm excited for
that. I am too, but it's funny to think
that 32 degrees
is warm. Yes.
I have to say, my 2 young ones, I have a hard time sending them outdoors on the weekends when it's, when it was negative.
My kids were begging me to go outside.
The thing is they will go outside, but they want me to go with them. And sadly to say, I am too much of a chicken to
Mom's a pansy, huh?
Kind of. Yes. Yes. I just don't want to be in that cold. And it's the worst thing is when you're in that cold and you're just standing there. I often think about our teachers when they have to take like recess duty.
Yes.
You know, they're just standing there watching the kids. Like, I feel ya. Like, I totally feel ya. I do not want to just stand there and watch. Like, I would partake in, I don't know what I would do. But
So the next time you drop your kids off and you see a cold teacher standing outside, offer her a hot cup of coffee.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Keep her hands warm.
That's a really good idea. That's a good idea.
So we're going to transition a little now that it's so cold outside. We talked about our animals, but we see a lot of people who are missing gardening and missing being outside and seeing the green. And so they think, oh, I can do this inside and I can handle a houseplant. But houseplants are a totally different beast.
They you know, the growing patterns are the same. It's just there's a difference because of the season. You know, a lot of people will have houseplants all year round, but the thing to know during the winter time, it's different than say during the fall time. And that's because, you know, traditionally we are much drier because of the cold weather and everything.
And even our air is drier.
Exactly. Our homes are drier, our air is drier, and so plants don't necessarily do the best in dry climates. Some plants will do very well, but most of our house plants really don't do the best in dry conditions. And so, for those of us that have maybe received poinsettias or those holiday plants from the holidays, be sure that you're putting those plants next to the window so they're getting bright light and water as the top of the soil becomes dry. And so if you're looking at your pot and you're seeing the top just crack a little bit, then it is definitely time to be watering.
And see, with houseplants, my problem is I tend to think that they're dying of thirst, and so I overwater my plants.
Okay, yep.
And so what are some tips that you can give people to, when the top of the soil's dry, but how much do you give a plant?
You know, it depends on the size of the plant and the pot that the plant is in. It really depends on that size because what you would be watering, say, a corn plant, I'm just thinking my corn plant in my house stands.
You have a corn plant in
I have
your
a corn
house?
plant. Yeah.
Like a corn stalk?
No, it's not a corn stalk. I'm sorry. We call it a corn plant. I don't know the actual botany name for it, but we call it a corn plant. It kind of is one of those that just it shoots up from the top and then it just leaves out.
Okay.
And it's taller than I am, which I know doesn't take much, but it is over 5 feet tall. And so that plant sits right in my corner next to my bay window because that's where it's going to get the most light, along with all my other little house plants that I have. And so really the watering depends on how big the plant is. You want to be careful not to water too much, but you want to be more, I would say it would be more active to water more often if you're not sure, if you're worried about watering too much. If you're worried about giving it too much one time, water it a little bit less more often.
Because you don't want the water to come out onto the tray on the bottom.
Exactly. You don't want that because all that's doing is it's pushing that water out, and so the roots aren't able to really capture the nutrients they need. So we don't want it to be pushing out from the bottom. Our houses usually, they get kind of drier, and our plants prefer more of a humid, warm environment, so increase that humidity around your house plants. One easy thing you can do is take all of your house plants and put them in the same area. That will help with that warmth. Just like if you stick a bunch of people in a room, say the small studio here, if you put about 20 people in here, it would get mighty toasty.
And humid.
Exactly. So by putting your houseplants together, that will help create that warmth that they need. The other thing is placing them on pebble water trays. And really, I guess I'm not so particular on a pebble water tray, just a water tray in general. They should be on some type of water tray. That way the bottom holes are not being blocked. And so you need to allow those holes you might not think much about, being that they're at the bottom, but they actually transpire air. They bring up some air through the roots. And so you need to get that pot up a little bit, and those trays allow for a little air to be evaporated through the roots there. The other thing is running a humidifier. If your home is really dry, which my home is really dry, I actually have a humidifier within about 10, 15 feet from my plants. And that is just to kind of help with that humidity.
And this is good not only for your plants, but also your family.
Very true.
We're talking about plants, but that the humidity is good for our skin. It's good for our lungs. It helps keep us from getting sick because that extra moisture in the air keeps things working properly. So even if you have 1 or 2 houseplants, you can justify getting a humidifier because it's also good for you.
It is. It is actually very good for you. I do have to share. There's 2 things. So on humidifiers, you want to make sure that you're cleaning it regularly.
Yes.
Because bacteria will build up in it, and what the function of that humidifier is to send moist
healthy particles.
Air, and send increase that health of that air. Well, if you have bacteria growing in the chambers or the water's been stagnant for some time, then you're spewing a lot of icky things in the air that won't really help you, but might make you sicker.
It defeats the purpose.
It does. And so you want to make sure that you're cleaning it regularly. And also, I just have to say, we bought 2 new humidifiers, 1 each for my kids. I have a daughter and a son, and we got the animal-shaped ones.
Yep.
And so we have Penelope the pig, which is pink because Addie, my daughter, loves anything pink. So we gave the kids a choice of what they wanted. She picked the pig because it was pink. My son has Freddy the Frog, and it's green. His favorite color is green. So pretty much they're awesome, little fun things to have around the house. My kids enjoy them. I know they're a little more expensive, but it really does help with your health. It can help with your house plants. And so, it's really a nice thing to have, and especially here in North Dakota where we have such a cold climate.
I grew up in a cold climate in Montana, but we don't have a dry cold climate like here. My hands and my skin in general gets so dry during the winter. I feel like I'm constantly putting lotion on, and it's not doing anything. So the humidifiers and adding that extra moisture into your air will really help both you and your houseplants.
Yes. Very true.
Wrapping up the show here, we talked about taking care of your livestock and your pets in the cold winter months. Just a reminder, if you need help with those feed rations, give Ashley a call at 221-6865. She's helped several producers in the area get those feed rations appropriate for what they are wanting to achieve with their livestock. So she's a great resource that we have here. We also talked about keeping those cats, pets that you may have outside warm, fresh water, not frozen water, and providing adequate shelter. And then get some house plants, but make sure you know what you're doing when you take care of them. Increase the humidity and make sure they have sunlight in your homes. So thank you for listening to the Burleigh County Extension Connection, and we will see you guys in a few weeks.
You've been listening to Extension Connection on Super Talk 1270. News and information from NDSU Extension Service and representatives of Morton and Burleigh County Extension offices. Tell your friends to listen in for the next Extension Connection, exclusively here on Super Talk 1270.